Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he loaded another magazine into his rifle. The Riverside shooting range was busy today, filled with the usual mix of police officers, weekend warriors, and military personnel honing their skills. Jake belonged to the last group, spending every spare hour preparing for Navy SEAL selection. His instructors had made it clear that only perfect shots would make it through the program. He had been coming here for 3 months now, always on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when the range was less crowded. That was when he first noticed the old man in Lane 7. The guy looked to be in his 70s with gray hair and weathered hands that moved with surprising steadiness. He always arrived at exactly 2:30 and left at exactly 3:17. Jake had started timing him after the 3rd week. What struck Jake most about the old man was not his age or his punctuality, but his shooting. The guy was better than anyone Jake had ever seen, including his SEAL instructors who had decades of combat experience. The old man fired with mechanical precision, each shot placed exactly where he intended it to go. His groups were so tight they looked like they had been drawn with a pencil. The strange thing was the rifle he used. Jake had studied every weapon system the military used, but he had never seen anything like the old man's gun. It looked like a standard hunting rifle from a distance, but there were modifications that made no sense. The scope was too advanced for civilian use, and there were components built into the stock that Jake could not identify. Sometimes he caught glimpses of strange markings along the barrel when the light hit it just right. The old man never spoke to anyone. He would nod politely to the range safety officer when he arrived, set up his equipment with practiced efficiency, fire exactly 60 rounds in precisely arranged patterns, then pack everything away and leave. No small talk, no boasting about his scores, no interest in comparing equipment with other shooters. He was like a ghost who appeared, demonstrated impossible marksmanship, then vanished until the next session. Jake found himself becoming obsessed with watching the old man shoot. During his own practice sessions, he would steal glances at Lane 7, trying to figure out how someone that age could maintain such incredible accuracy. The man's stance was perfect, his breathing controlled, his trigger pull smooth as silk. But there was something else, something Jake could not quite identify. The old man shot like he was remembering something rather than learning something. Other people at the range had started calling him the ghost shooter. Some of the younger guys made jokes about him being a retired sniper, or maybe a former Olympic competitor, but Jake sensed there was more to the story. The way the old man carried himself suggested military training, but it was unlike any military bearing Jake had encountered. There was a precision to his movements that went beyond normal discipline, as if every gesture had been refined through years of life or death situations. Today was different, though. The range was unusually quiet, with only Jake and the old man present in their usual lanes. Jake was working on long-distance shooting, trying to consistently hit targets at 600 yards. His groups were good but not great, and frustration was building with each less-than-perfect shot. He was so focused on his shooting that he almost missed what happened next. The old man was adjusting his shooting position when his sleeve rode up slightly. For just a moment, Jake caught sight of something that made him forget about his own target completely. There was a tattoo on the old man's forearm, but it was unlike any military ink Jake had ever seen. The design seemed to shift and move in the light, showing what looked like a star map surrounding a symbol that was difficult to look at directly. Below the strange design in crisp military lettering were words that made Jake's blood run cold. Terran Defense Corps, Deep Space Division. Jake had memorized every military unit, every special operations group, and every classified program he could find information about during his SEAL preparation. He had studied military history, unit insignia, and organizational charts until he could recite them in his sleep. The Terran Defense Corps was not in any database, any history book, or any declassified document he had ever encountered. The name suggested something that should not exist, something that implied operations far beyond anything the military acknowledged. The old man noticed Jake staring and quickly pulled his sleeve down. For a moment their eyes met across the shooting lanes. The old man's eyes were gray and held depths that Jake could not fathom. They were eyes that had seen things beyond the normal scope of human experience, eyes that carried secrets too heavy for one person to bear alone. Jake felt his heart racing as he tried to process what he had just seen. Everything about the old man suddenly made more sense and no sense at the same time. The impossible accuracy, the modified rifle, the precise timing, The way he moved like gravity affected him differently than other people. If the tattoo was real, if there really was something called the Terran Defense Corps with a deep space division, then everything Jake thought he knew about the world was wrong. The old man finished packing his equipment and walked toward the exit. As he passed Jake's lane, he paused for just a moment. Without looking directly at Jake, he spoke in a quiet voice that carried clearly despite the distance. "Nice shooting, son. Keep practicing. You might need those skills sooner than you think." Then he was gone, leaving Jake alone with his racing thoughts and 1,000 questions that he was not sure he wanted answered. The target downrange seemed insignificant now compared to the mystery that had just walked out of the shooting range. Jake realized that his life had just changed in ways he could not yet understand, and that the old man in Lane 7 was about to become much more important than just another face at the shooting range. Jake stared at the displays surrounding him, trying to process the enormity of what Harris was revealing. The evidence was overwhelming, but it challenged every assumption he had ever made about reality. Space battles, alien threats, secret military organizations that had been protecting Earth for decades while the public remained completely unaware. "Show me everything," Jake said finally. "If I am going to make this decision, I need to understand exactly what I would be getting into." Harris nodded approvingly and activated a series of holographic projectors that Jake had not noticed before. The air above the central workstation filled with three-dimensional images that were so realistic, they seemed solid. The first display showed what appeared to be a star map, but with markings and annotations that indicated territorial boundaries and conflict zones. "This is our current understanding of local galactic politics," Harris explained. "Humanity controls exactly one star system, ours. We are surrounded by 17 different species, most of which view us as a potential threat that needs to be contained or eliminated. The red zones indicate areas where human vessels have been attacked on sight. The yellow zones are neutral territory where we can operate if we are careful. The green zones are the 3 species that have been willing to engage in limited trade and communication." Jake studied the map carefully. The human territory was a tiny blue dot surrounded by vast areas of red. The scale was intimidating, suggesting that humanity was vastly outnumbered and outgunned in any potential conflict. "How have we survived this long against those odds?" Harris smiled grimly. "The same way David survived against Goliath. We fight dirty, we adapt quickly, and we refuse to give up even when the situation seems hopeless. Most alien species have been using the same military tactics for thousands of years. They fight according to established protocols and traditional strategies that prioritize honor and formal rules of engagement. Humans do not." The holographic display shifted to show combat footage that made Jake's heart race. Human fighters engaged alien vessels using tactics that seemed to violate every principle of space combat. Ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting with massive damage. Crews that should have surrendered found ways to turn desperate situations into victories. And weapons that appeared primitive somehow proved effective against supposedly superior technology. "We learned early that our greatest advantage is unpredictability," Harris continued. "Alien military commanders study human combat records trying to identify patterns they can counter. But we keep changing our methods faster than they can adapt. When they expect us to retreat, we attack. When they prepare for conventional tactics, we improvise something completely unexpected." Jake watched human pilots ram their damaged fighters into alien command ships. Ground troops used jury-rigged explosives to destroy targets that should have been invulnerable, and boarding parties capture enemy vessels using nothing but determination and creative use of basic equipment. It was inspiring and terrifying at the same time. "But what really sets us apart is our refusal to accept defeat," Harris said. "Other species surrender when the odds become impossible. Humans fight harder. We have won battles that should have been massacres simply because we kept fighting when any rational species would have given up." The display changed again, showing what appeared to be a timeline of major conflicts. Jake could see engagement dates stretching back almost 70 years, with intensity levels that suggested the war had been far more extensive than he had imagined. Some of the battles involved fleets of hundreds of ships, while others were small unit actions in remote star systems. "How many people have died in this war?" Jake asked quietly. "Too many," Harris replied. "The official casualty count is classified, but I can tell you that entire Defense Corps units have been lost with no survivors. We have memorial walls listing the names of heroes who died so far from Earth that their families never even learned what happened to them. The cost of keeping Earth safe has been higher than most people could imagine. Jake felt the weight of that sacrifice settling on his shoulders. These were people who had given up everything to protect a world that did not even know they existed. They had fought and died in secret, with no recognition or gratitude from the people they were protecting. Why keep it secret? Jake asked. If the threat is real, if people are dying to protect Earth, why not tell the public what is happening? Harris activated another display that showed psychological analysis reports and social stability projections, because the truth would cause worldwide panic. Our analysts determined that revealing the existence of hostile alien species would result in social collapse, economic chaos, and probably nuclear war as nations struggled to blame each other for the situation. Better to keep the war secret and let people continue their normal lives. But the war is not over, Jake observed. No, it is not, Harris confirmed. In fact, our intelligence suggests that it is about to escalate significantly. The alien coalition has been gathering strength while our forces have been reduced to almost nothing. They are preparing for what they call a final solution to the human problem. Jake felt a chill of fear mixed with anger. The idea that Earth was under threat while its people remained completely unaware was almost unbearable. What kind of final solution? Harris activated a display showing intercepted alien communications translated into English. Complete sterilization of the Sol system, followed by colonization by approved species. They have decided that humans are too dangerous to be allowed to spread beyond our home system, so they are planning to eliminate us entirely. The translated documents were detailed and methodical, laying out plans for orbital bombardment, biological warfare, and systematic destruction of human civilization. Reading them made Jake feel sick but also furious. These aliens were discussing the extinction of his entire species as if it were a routine administrative matter. When? Jake asked. Our best estimates suggest they will begin their final offensive within the next 18 months, Harris replied. They are currently positioning fleets in nearby star systems and conducting reconnaissance missions to identify our remaining defensive capabilities. When they are satisfied that we cannot offer effective resistance, they will attack. Jake stared at the timeline projections showing the gradual buildup of alien forces. The scale of the threat was overwhelming, but he also felt a burning determination to do something about it. How many active Defense Corps personnel do we have left? Including myself. Exactly 43 people are currently capable of space combat operations, Harris said. Most of them are past retirement age and operating equipment that should have been replaced years ago. We have maybe 6 months of effective resistance before our capabilities are completely exhausted. 43 people against an entire galactic coalition, Jake said. That is impossible odds. Harris smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Some humans have been beating impossible odds since we first picked up rocks to fight predators with bigger teeth than us. The question is not whether we can win, but whether we can find enough people willing to try. I want to try, Jake said without hesitation. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to learn, I want to be part of stopping this. Harris studied him carefully. Are you certain? Once you begin Defense Corps training, there is no going back to your old life. You will become something more than human, but you will also become responsible for protecting humanity in ways that most people could never understand. I am certain, Jake replied. When do we start? Jake spent the entire week wrestling with Harris's invitation. Half of him wanted to dismiss the whole thing as the fantasies of an eccentric old veteran who had watched too many science fiction movies. The other half could not shake the feeling that he had stumbled onto something real and important, something that would change his life forever if he chose to pursue it. He tried to research Colonel William Harris but found nothing in military databases. There were several William Harrises who had served in various branches, but none of them matched the age or description of the man from the shooting range. It was as if the colonel had never officially existed, which only made Jake more curious about what he might learn. Thursday arrived gray and overcast, with storm clouds building on the horizon. Jake arrived at the shooting range at exactly 2:15, feeling nervous and excited at the same time. The parking lot was nearly empty, with only a few cars scattered across the asphalt. Harris was already there, standing beside a dark sedan that Jake had not noticed before. You came, Harris said as Jake approached. I was not entirely certain you would. I have to know, Jake replied. Whatever this is about, I need to understand it. Harris nodded approvingly. Curiosity is a valuable trait in our line of work, but so is caution. Before we go any further, I need to know that you can handle information that will challenge everything you believe about the world. Jake took a deep breath. I think I am ready. Harris gestured toward his car. Then we should go somewhere more private. The shooting range has too many ears, and what I am about to show you requires absolute secrecy. They drove in silence through the countryside, leaving the city behind and heading into rural areas that Jake had never explored. Harris seemed to know exactly where he was going, following back roads and farm tracks with the confidence of someone who had made this journey many times before. After 40 minutes of driving, they turned onto a dirt road that led to what appeared to be an abandoned farm. The farmhouse was old and weathered, with peeling paint and broken shutters that suggested it had been empty for years. But as they got closer, Jake noticed subtle details that contradicted that impression. The windows were clean, the driveway was recently maintained, and there were tire tracks indicating regular use. It was camouflaged to look abandoned, but it was clearly still active. Harris parked behind the farmhouse and led Jake to what appeared to be a root cellar entrance. The heavy wooden door looked like it belonged on a historical preservation site. But when Harris opened it, Jake could see that it concealed modern security equipment and reinforced construction. They descended concrete steps into a facility that definitely had not existed when the farmhouse was built. The underground complex was small but sophisticated, with workstations, communication equipment, and displays that looked more advanced than anything Jake had seen in military facilities. The walls were lined with maps and charts that showed stellar configurations, orbital mechanics, and what appeared to be tactical information for locations that were definitely not on Earth. "Welcome to Firebase 7, Harris said as he activated the lighting systems, one of 12 deep monitoring stations that have been tracking threats to Earth for the past 60 years. Jake stared at the equipment surrounding him. The displays were showing real-time data feeds from sources he could not identify. Star charts rotated slowly, showing movements of objects in space that were clearly under intelligent control. Communication panels buzzed with encrypted traffic that was being automatically decoded and analyzed. "This is impossible," Jake said. "If we had space monitoring capabilities like this, everyone would know about it. The government would never be able to keep something this big secret." Harris laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "The government keeps bigger secrets than this every day. Besides, they do not have to keep it secret from everyone, just from the general public. Most of the military leadership knows about the Defense Corps. They just pretend we do not exist for political convenience." He activated a large display that showed a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Dozens of objects were marked with various symbols and designations, far more than the satellites and space stations that were publicly acknowledged. Some of the objects were moving in patterns that suggested they were actively patrolling, rather than following simple orbital mechanics. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "You are looking at humanity's first line of defense," Harris replied. "Those are monitoring stations, weapons platforms, and patrol vessels that have been protecting Earth from threats that most people cannot imagine. Some of them have been out there for decades, watching and waiting for signs of hostile activity." Jake studied the display more carefully. The scale was enormous, with coverage extending far beyond the asteroid belt and into the outer reaches of the solar system. The level of coordination and sophistication required for such an operation was staggering. "Who built all this? How long has it been operational?" "Construction began in 1962, 3 years after we made first contact," Harris said quietly. "The initial contact was not friendly. We learned very quickly that we were not welcome in the galaxy, and that if we wanted to survive as a species, we would need to develop defenses that no one would expect from a supposedly primitive world." He activated another display that showed what appeared to be combat footage from space battles. Human vessels engaged alien ships in conflicts that were clearly real, but had never been reported in any news media. The technology on both sides was far beyond anything that officially existed, and the scale of the battles suggested a war that had been raging for decades. "This is the truth about humanity's place in the universe," Harris continued. "We are not alone, we are not welcome, and we have been fighting for our survival longer than most people have been alive. The Terran Defense Corps was created to keep that fight as far from Earth as possible, so that people like you could grow up believing we were safe and alone." Jake felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. The implications were staggering, not just for his own future but for everything he thought he knew about the world. How many people know about this? The Defense Corps had about 50,000 active personnel at its peak, Harris said. Now there are fewer than 200 of us left, most of them too old for active duty. The government has decided that the threat has passed and that maintaining deep space defenses is no longer cost-effective. But you do not agree, Jake said. Harris pointed to a display showing recent sensor readings. Hostile activity has been increasing for the past 18 months. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected scout ships testing our defenses and gathering intelligence about Earth's current capabilities. Someone is planning something and we do not have enough people left to stop it. That is why you told me about this, Jake realized. You need new recruits. Harris nodded grimly. I need people who can learn quickly, think creatively, and handle the truth about what is really at stake. Your psychological profile suggests you have the right combination of intelligence, adaptability, and courage to be effective in this kind of work. What would I have to do? Jake asked. First, you would have to complete training that will push you beyond anything the SEALs could prepare you for. Then you would have to accept that your life as a normal human being is over. Once you know the truth, once you become part of the Defense Corps, there is no going back to the world you used to know. Jake could not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the tattoo on the old man's arm. The image was burned into his memory with photographic clarity, and the more he thought about it, the more disturbed he became. The design had not looked like any earthly military insignia he had ever seen. The star map portion seemed to show constellations he did not recognize, arranged around a central symbol that hurt to look at directly. He spent hours searching military databases, historical records, and even conspiracy theory websites looking for any mention of the Terran Defense Corps. The closest he could find were science fiction references and role-playing games. There was nothing in any official capacity that matched what he had seen. It was as if the organization simply did not exist, which made the tattoo even more mysterious. The next Thursday could not come fast enough. Jake arrived at the shooting range 30 minutes early, claiming Lane 6 so he would have a clear view of Lane 7 when the old man arrived. He tried to act natural, setting up his equipment and taking practice shots, but his attention was completely focused on watching for the mysterious shooter. At exactly 2:30, the old man appeared. He moved with the same efficient precision as always, setting up his modified rifle and beginning his shooting routine. Jake tried to concentrate on his own practice but found himself stealing glances every few seconds. He was looking for another glimpse of the tattoo, hoping to confirm what he had seen or prove to himself that he had imagined the whole thing. 20 minutes into the session, Jake got his chance. The old man was adjusting his scope when his sleeve rode up again. This time Jake was ready and he got a much better look at the tattoo. The star map was definitely showing stellar configurations that did not match any earthly sky. The symbols and markings around the edge looked almost like navigational coordinates, but for destinations that could not exist. The central emblem was geometric and alien, incorporating angles and curves that seemed to bend space around them. But it was the text that really shook Jake. Terran Defense Corps. Deep Space. Division was written in a font that looked both futuristic and ancient at the same time. Below that, in smaller text, were additional markings that looked like service dates and unit designations. Jake could make out what appeared to be engagement records and campaign ribbons for battles that had never been fought, at least not according to any history book he knew. The old man caught him staring again. This time, instead of pulling his sleeve down immediately, he paused and looked directly at Jake. There was something different in his expression, a weighing and measuring that felt like being evaluated for something important. "You are military," the old man said. It was not a question but a statement of fact delivered with absolute certainty. "Navy SEAL candidate," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jake Martinez." The old man continued packing his rifle case with methodical precision. "What gave it away?" he asked without looking up. "Your shooting stance, your breathing pattern, the way you clear malfunctions. You have been trained well, but you are still learning. Recent training, I would guess. Maybe 6 months of intensive preparation." Jake was impressed despite his nervousness. The old man had read him like an open book just from watching him shoot. "Close." 7 months. "How could you tell all that just from observing me?" "I've been watching soldiers for a very long time," the old man replied. "Long enough to recognize the signs of someone being prepared for something important. SEAL training is not easy. You must be very dedicated. I am, Jake said. But I have to ask about something I saw. Your tattoo. What is the Terran Defense Corps? The old man stopped packing and looked up. For a moment, his weathered face showed surprise, then something that might have been resignation or relief. That is a very dangerous question to ask, son. There are people who would kill to keep that information secret. There are also people who have died to protect it. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but pressed on. The Deep Space Division. What does that mean? What kind of operations require a Deep Space Division? The old man finished closing his rifle case and stood up. He was taller than Jake had realized, and despite his age, there was still strength in his frame. You have good eyes and a good memory. Those are useful skills, but they can also get you into trouble if you are not careful about how you use them. I have to know, Jake said. I have spent my whole life preparing for military service. If there are things happening that I do not know about, things that might affect my future, then I need to understand what they are. The old man studied him for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying secrets for far too long. My name is Colonel William Harris. I served in the Terran Defense Corps for 28 years before I was officially retired. The Deep Space Division handles threats that most people cannot imagine and would not believe if they were told. What kind of threats? Jake asked. The kind that come from places where human beings were never meant to go, Harris replied. The kind that require soldiers who can think beyond the limitations of terrestrial warfare. The kind that have been kept secret because the truth would cause panic on a global scale. Jake felt the world shifting around him. Everything he thought he knew about reality was being challenged by a conversation in a shooting range with an old man who claimed to be a veteran of conflicts that officially did not exist. Are you saying we are not alone? I am saying that being alone was never the problem, Harris said quietly. The problem is what happens when you are not alone and the neighbors are not friendly. The problem is what happens when an entire planet needs to be defended by people who officially do not exist. Harris picked up his equipment bag and started walking toward the exit. As he passed Jake, he paused and spoke without turning around. If you really want to know the truth, be here next Thursday at 2:15 instead of 2:30. Come alone and do not tell anyone where you are going. And Martinez, if you decide you would rather not know, there is no shame in that choice. Some knowledge cannot be unlearned. Then he was gone, leaving Jake standing in the shooting range with his mind reeling from implications he was not sure he was ready to accept. The training began immediately. Harris led Jake through a concealed passage to another section of the underground facility that Jake had not seen before. This area was larger and more sophisticated, with equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie, rather than a hidden bunker in rural farmland. Your first lesson is that everything you think you know about physics, biology, and warfare is based on limited Earth experience, Harris explained as he activated various systems. The universe operates by rules that humans are only beginning to understand, and successful Defense Corps operations require adapting to conditions that do not exist anywhere on Earth. The first chamber they entered contained what appeared to be a sophisticated simulator, but unlike any training device Jake had encountered during his military preparation, instead of screens and controls, there were pods that looked designed to accommodate a human body while providing complete sensory input from artificial sources. This is a full immersion combat trainer, Harris said. It will teach you to fight in zero gravity, variable gravity, hostile atmospheric conditions, and spatial orientations that would be impossible to replicate on Earth. Most importantly, it will help your brain adapt to thinking in 3 dimensions instead of the 2-dimensional battlefield concepts you learned in terrestrial military training. Jake climbed into the pod with some nervousness, unsure what to expect. The moment the system activated, he found himself floating in what appeared to be deep space, surrounded by stars and asteroids that seemed completely real. The sensation of weightlessness was disorienting at first, but gradually he began to understand how movement and combat worked without the anchor of gravity. The training scenarios were unlike anything he had experienced. Instead of fighting on flat ground with clear concepts of up and down, he learned to engage enemies who could attack from any direction in 3-dimensional space. Weapons behaved differently without air resistance and gravity, requiring completely new approaches to marksmanship and tactics. Human military doctrine had to be completely reimagined for space combat, Harris explained during a break between sessions. On Earth, you control territory by holding key positions on the ground. In space, territory is volume, and enemies can approach from literally any direction. Traditional concepts like flanking maneuvers and defensive positions become meaningless when there is no fixed reference point. Jake quickly discovered that space combat required a completely different mindset. Success depended on thinking in 3 dimensions, anticipating enemy movements through complex orbital mechanics, and understanding how momentum and trajectory worked in environments without friction or air resistance. It was exhausting mental work that pushed his cognitive abilities to their limits. After 2 weeks of simulator training, Harris introduced Jake to actual Defense Corps equipment. The weapons were clearly based on human engineering principles, but incorporated technologies that had been adapted from captured alien systems. The results were hybrid devices that combined human innovation with alien capabilities. "This is a standard Defense Corps assault rifle," Harris said, handing Jake a weapon that looked superficially similar to military firearms he knew, but felt different in ways he could not immediately identify. "It fires coherent energy pulses instead of conventional ammunition, which means no bullet drop, no wind drift, and no need to carry heavy magazines. But it also means learning completely new shooting techniques." The energy weapon required a completely different approach to marksmanship. Without physical projectiles, there was no familiar recoil or trajectory to compensate for. Instead, Jake had to learn to manage heat buildup, energy consumption, and targeting systems that could lock onto enemies across vast distances in space. But the real challenge was not the equipment, it was the physical conditioning required to use it effectively. Defense Corps operations took place in environments that were hostile to human life, requiring enhancements that pushed the boundaries of what the human body could endure. "These are basic enhancement systems," Harris explained, showing Jake a collection of devices that looked like a combination of medical equipment and technological implants. "They will improve your reflexes, increase your strength and endurance, enhance your cognitive processing speed, and allow you to survive in environments that would kill an unenhanced human within minutes." Jake stared at the enhancement systems with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The idea of becoming stronger and faster was appealing, but the devices clearly represented a fundamental change to his basic humanity. "What are the side effects? You will become faster, stronger, and smarter than any normal human," Harris replied honestly. "You will be able to survive in space environments, process tactical information at superhuman speeds, and react to threats faster than human reflexes should allow. But you will also become dependent on regular maintenance and upgrades, and you will never again be able to live a completely normal human life." The enhancement process took place over several days, with Harris carefully monitoring Jake's adaptation to each new system. The changes were gradual but dramatic. Jake could feel his reflexes becoming sharper, his thinking becoming clearer, and his physical capabilities expanding beyond normal human limits. But the most significant change was psychological. As the enhancements integrated with his nervous system, Jake began to perceive the world differently. He could process multiple streams of information simultaneously, anticipate tactical situations with inhuman accuracy, and maintain perfect calm in situations that should have been overwhelming. "This is what every Defense Corps operative experiences," Harris explained as Jake adapted to his enhanced capabilities. "You are becoming something more than human, but you are also becoming responsible for protecting humanity in ways that normal people could never understand." The final phase of training involved actual combat, exercises using real Defense Corps equipment in simulated alien environments. Jake found himself fighting holographic enemies that moved and behaved according to alien tactical principles, learning to counter strategies that were based on completely different approaches to warfare. Alien military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower and formal battle formations. Harris explained during one particularly challenging exercise, "They expect enemies to retreat when faced with superior force, and they become confused when opponents refuse to follow traditional rules of engagement. Your job is to be unpredictable, adaptive, and willing to take risks that no rational alien commander would expect." Jake learned to use human creativity and adaptability as weapons against enemies who relied on established protocols. Instead of matching alien firepower directly, he learned to find weaknesses in their formations, exploit their assumptions about how battles should be fought, and use improvised tactics that turned their advantages into vulnerabilities. After 6 weeks of intensive training, Harris declared Jake ready for his first real mission. The assignment was reconnaissance of an alien monitoring station that had been established just outside the solar system. It would be Jake's first opportunity to put his training into practice against real enemies in actual space combat conditions. "Are you ready for this?" Harris asked as they prepared the mission equipment. Jake checked his enhanced reflexes, tested his energy weapons, and reviewed the tactical plan one final time. He felt different than he had before the training began, more capable and confident, but also aware of the enormous responsibility he was accepting. "I am ready," Jake replied. "Let us go show these aliens what humans can do when we are properly motivated." The intelligence Jake had gathered changed everything. Harris immediately activated emergency communication protocols that had not been used in decades, reaching out to the scattered survivors of the Terran Defense Corps around the globe. Within hours, responses began arriving from hidden facilities that Jake had not known existed. "We are not as alone as I thought," Harris said as he monitored the incoming messages. "There are still 37 active Defense Corps personnel scattered across 12 different facilities. Most of them are my age or older, but they have been maintaining their equipment and monitoring alien activity just as I have been doing." Jake studied the global map showing the locations of the hidden facilities. They were positioned strategically around the world, each one covering a different sector of space and maintaining different types of equipment. Some specialized in deep space monitoring, others focused on weapons development, and a few maintained small fleets of spacecraft that were ready for immediate deployment. "The problem is coordination," Harris continued. "We have been operating independently for so long that we do not have unified command structure or shared tactical plans. Each facility has been preparing for the final battle in its own way, but we have never worked together as a coherent military force." Jake realized that this was both a weakness and an opportunity. The alien intelligence he had observed suggested that their enemies expected human resistance to follow predictable military patterns, with clear command hierarchies and standardized tactics. A collection of independent operators using different approaches might actually be more effective than a conventional unified force. "Maybe that is an advantage," Jake suggested. "If we coordinate our efforts without standardizing our methods, the aliens will have trouble predicting what we are going to do next." Harris looked impressed by the tactical insight. "That is exactly the kind of thinking that made humans dangerous to begin with. Instead of fighting the war the aliens expect, we fight it in ways they cannot anticipate or counter." They spent the next week establishing secure communication links with all the active Defense Corps facilities and sharing intelligence about alien activities. What emerged was a picture of a threat that was even larger than Jake had realized. The monitoring station he had observed was one of dozens positioned throughout the solar system, and each one was connected to a network that extended far beyond Earth's immediate neighborhood. "The aliens have been preparing for this final offensive for at least 5 years," reported Commander Patricia Lopez from a facility hidden beneath the Mexican desert. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements in nearby star systems, and communication intercepts suggest they are coordinating with allied species throughout this entire region of the galaxy." But the most disturbing intelligence came from Dr. Alan Chen, who had been monitoring alien communications from a station concealed in Antarctica. "The aliens are not just planning to destroy human civilization," he reported. "They intend to use Earth as a demonstration of what happens to species that refuse to accept galactic authority. They want to make an example that will discourage other developing civilizations from following our path." Jake felt anger building as he listened to the reports. The aliens were not just threatening humanity. They were planning to use the destruction of Earth as a terror weapon against other species who might dare to develop independent space capabilities. It was genocide for the purpose of maintaining galactic political control. "How many ships do they have available for the final assault?" Harris asked. "Our best estimates suggest a minimum of 3,000 major combat vessels," Chen replied. "Possibly more if they call in additional forces from allied species. Each ship is capable of destroying entire cities, and their combined firepower could render Earth uninhabitable within hours of beginning their attack." The numbers were overwhelming, but Jake found himself thinking about the tactical principles Harris had taught him. Superior firepower was meaningless if it could not be applied effectively, and alien confidence in their numerical advantage might make them vulnerable to unexpected strategies. "What about our capabilities?" Jake asked. How many operational spacecraft do we have available? The responses were sobering. Between all the Defense Corps facilities, there were exactly 43 spacecraft in various states of readiness. Most of them were old. Some were experimental, and none of them could match alien vessels in direct combat. It was 43 ships against 3,000, odds that should have made resistance pointless. But Harris was smiling as he listened to the inventory reports. "You are all thinking like conventional military commanders," he said. "You are trying to match alien strengths with equivalent human strengths, which obviously will not work. Instead, we should be thinking about how to turn their advantages into vulnerabilities." Jake understood immediately. The aliens expected to fight a conventional space battle against organized human forces using predictable tactics and equipment. If the Defense Corps could avoid that kind of engagement entirely, they might be able to achieve objectives that would be impossible through direct confrontation. "We do not try to destroy their fleet," Jake suggested. "We try to make their fleet irrelevant by attacking targets they cannot defend using methods they cannot counter." "Exactly," Harris confirmed. "The aliens have been planning this offensive for years, which means they have invested enormous resources in assembling their invasion force. If we can disrupt their coordination, destroy their supply lines, and force them to operate outside their planned parameters, we might be able to create opportunities for success that do not depend on matching their firepower." The strategy that emerged from their planning sessions was unlike anything in conventional military doctrine. Instead of attempting to defend Earth directly, the Defense Corps would launch simultaneous attacks against alien infrastructure throughout the solar system. Communications relays, supply depots, command centers, and monitoring stations would all be targeted using small teams operating independently with maximum unpredictability. Each team will operate according to general objectives, but specific methods will be improvised based on local conditions, Harris explained. "The aliens will not be able to predict our tactics because we will not know our own tactics until we are actually implementing them." Jake was assigned to lead one of the strike teams, working with 3 other enhanced operatives to target the alien monitoring stations in the outer solar system. His success in gathering intelligence from the first station had demonstrated his ability to operate effectively in deep space, and his enhanced systems gave him capabilities that would be essential for the high-risk missions they were planning. The preparation phase took 2 months, with each team developing specialized equipment and training for their specific targets. Jake worked with weapons specialists to create portable systems that could disable alien technology, with engineers to design improvised spacecraft modifications that would improve stealth and maneuverability, and with intelligence analysts to identify the most critical vulnerabilities in alien operations. But the most important preparation was psychological. Every member of the Defense Corps understood that they were probably going on suicide missions with minimal chances of survival. The alien forces were simply too powerful for conventional military victory, and the human teams would be vastly outnumbered in every engagement. "We are not trying to win a war in the traditional sense," Harris explained during the final briefing. "We are trying to create enough chaos and disruption to force the aliens to reconsider whether conquering Earth is worth the cost. If we can make ourselves too expensive to defeat, they might decide to look for easier targets." Jake understood the strategy, but he also understood the sacrifice it required. Most of the Defense Corps operatives would not survive the mission, and even if they succeeded in disrupting the alien offensive, there was no guarantee that Earth would be safe in the long term. "Are you ready for this?" Harris asked as they conducted final equipment checks. Jake thought about his family, his friends, and all the people on Earth who had no idea that their lives depended on the success of 43 aging warriors fighting impossible odds in the darkness of space. "I am ready," Jake replied. "Let us show these aliens what humans do when our survival is at stake." Jake's first mission launched from a concealed facility in Nevada that looked like an abandoned mining operation from the outside. The actual launch platform was buried 300 feet underground, connected to the surface by a shaft that could be sealed and camouflaged within minutes of a spacecraft departure. Harris led him through the pre-flight preparations with the same methodical precision he had shown at the shooting range. The spacecraft itself was unlike anything Jake had imagined. It looked more like a sleek fighter jet than the bulky rockets he had seen in news footage of space launches. The hull was made from materials that seemed to bend light around them, creating an optical illusion that made the ship difficult to focus on directly. Harris explained that the stealth technology was a combination of human engineering and alien principles captured during decades of covert warfare. Your mission is simple in concept, but difficult in execution, Harris said as they conducted final equipment checks. Approach the alien monitoring station, gather intelligence about their capabilities and intentions, and return without being detected. The station is located at the edge of our solar system. Approximately 18 hours of flight time each direction. Jake climbed into the pilot seat and felt the enhanced neural interfaces connecting with his modified nervous system. Suddenly, he could perceive the spacecraft as an extension of his own body, with sensors that became his eyes and ears and weapon systems that responded to his thoughts as quickly as his natural reflexes. The integration was seamless and slightly overwhelming. The launch was nothing like the dramatic rocket launches Jake had seen on television. Instead of thunderous engines and massive flames, the ship simply rose silently through the concealed shaft and accelerated smoothly into the upper atmosphere. Within minutes, they had passed beyond Earth's gravitational influence and were traveling through deep space at speeds that should have been impossible. The journey gave Jake time to study the intelligence reports about their target. The alien monitoring station was a massive construct that had appeared at the edge of the solar system 6 months earlier. It was clearly watching Earth and gathering information about human activities, but its exact capabilities and purpose remained unknown. Previous attempts to get close, enough for detailed reconnaissance, had failed because the aliens had detected and destroyed the human scout ships before they could gather useful data. Your enhanced systems should allow you to succeed where previous missions failed, Harris explained through the communication link. The aliens expect human technology to operate within certain parameters, but your modifications will let you approach using methods they have not encountered before. As they drew closer to the target, Jake began to understand the scale of what they were dealing with. The alien station was enormous, easily the size of a large city, with structures and systems that defied human understanding of engineering principles. It appeared to be both a monitoring facility and a military base, with weapon systems that could probably destroy anything Earth could send against it. The station's sensors were constantly sweeping space around it, searching for any sign of human activity. Jake watched the scanning patterns and began to identify gaps and blind spots that a skilled pilot might be able to exploit. The aliens were thorough but predictable, following established protocols that assumed their enemies would behave in conventional ways. Jake activated the ship's stealth systems and began his approach, using a trajectory that took advantage of the sensor gaps he had identified. The enhanced reflexes and tactical processing allowed him to make split-second adjustments that kept him invisible to the alien detection grid. It was like playing a three-dimensional chess game where a single mistake would result in immediate destruction. As he got closer, the true scale of the alien station became apparent. The structure was not just large, it was impossibly complex, with layers of technology that seemed to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Jake could see docking bays for ships that dwarfed anything in the human fleet, weapon batteries that could probably crack planets, and communication arrays that were obviously coordinating with other alien forces throughout the galaxy. But what really caught his attention were the construction activities taking place around the station. New sections were being added constantly, and supply ships arrived regularly carrying materials and equipment. The aliens were not just monitoring Earth, they were building something much larger and more dangerous. Jake carefully recorded everything he could see, using sensors that captured information across multiple spectrums and dimensional parameters. The data would be invaluable for understanding alien capabilities and intentions, but first he had to get it back to Earth without being detected. The return journey should have been routine, but halfway back to Earth the ship's sensors detected multiple alien vessels moving to intercept his course. Somehow they had identified his mission despite the stealth technology, and they were positioning themselves to prevent his escape. Jake found himself facing exactly the kind of situation his training had prepared him for. Instead of trying to outrun the alien ships, which would have been impossible given their superior speed and numbers, Jake did something they would not expect. He shut down all non-essential systems, reduced his ship's energy signature to almost nothing, and allowed himself to drift like a piece of space debris while the alien patrols searched for him. The aliens passed within a few thousand kilometers of his position, their sensors sweeping the area repeatedly, but they were looking for an active spacecraft trying to escape. A drifting piece of metal with minimal energy output was beneath their notice, especially when their protocols told them that humans would try to flee at maximum speed when discovered. After the alien ships moved on to search other areas, Jake carefully reactivated his systems and continued toward Earth, using a completely different route. The detour added several hours to his travel time, but it ensured that he could deliver the intelligence he had gathered. When he finally reached the hidden facility in Nevada, Harris was waiting with an expression of grim satisfaction. The mission had been successful, but the information Jake had gathered confirmed their worst fears about alien intentions. The monitoring station was just the beginning of a much larger operation designed to eliminate human civilization entirely. The aliens are not just planning to attack Earth, Harris said as he reviewed the reconnaissance data. They are building the infrastructure necessary to occupy and colonize our entire solar system. What you observed was preparation for a permanent invasion, not just a military strike. Jake felt the weight of that revelation settling on his shoulders. Everything he had learned about the alien threat suddenly seemed much more urgent and personal. How long do we have before they are ready to begin their final attack? Harris studied the construction timeline data that Jake had captured. Based on the rate of activity you observed, I estimate we have less than 12 months before they have sufficient forces in position to guarantee success. After that, Earth's chances of survival become essentially zero. But Jake was not thinking about surrender or despair. The enhanced systems Harris had given him were processing the tactical situation and identifying possibilities that normal human thinking might have missed. The aliens were powerful and numerous, but they were also predictable and overconfident. There might be ways to turn their advantages against them. What do we do now? Jake asked. Now we prepare for war, Harris replied. Real war, not the limited skirmishes we have been fighting for decades. And we hope that humanity's talent for impossible victories is strong enough to overcome odds that no rational species would dare to face. The attack began at exactly 0300 hours Coordinated Universal Time, with all 12 Defense Corps teams launching simultaneously from their hidden facilities around Earth. Jake's ship lifted silently from the Nevada complex while similar spacecraft departed from locations in Antarctica, Siberia, the Australian outback, and 8 other carefully concealed bases that had been waiting decades for this moment. The coordination was perfect, but each team immediately diverged onto completely different trajectories using unpredictable flight patterns that would make alien interception almost impossible. Jake's target was the massive monitoring station he had previously reconnoitered, but his approach would be entirely different from his intelligence-gathering mission. Instead of trying to avoid detection, Jake planned to announce his presence in the most dramatic way possible. The alien station expected stealth approaches and defensive tactics, so he would give them exactly the opposite. Sometimes the best way to be unpredictable was to do something so obvious that enemies assumed it must be a deception. Jake accelerated directly toward the alien station at maximum velocity, broadcasting human military frequencies and making no attempt to conceal his approach. The alien sensors detected him immediately, and he could see defensive systems activating as they prepared to destroy what appeared to be a suicidal human attack. But Jake was not planning to ram the station or engage in direct combat. At the last possible moment, he fired a spread of specialized warheads that he and the weapons team had developed specifically for this mission. Instead of conventional explosives, the warheads contained electromagnetic pulse generators, designed to disrupt alien technology using principles that human engineers had discovered during decades of studying captured equipment. The warheads detonated just outside the station's defensive perimeter, creating cascading energy discharges that interfered with alien electronics in ways their designers had never anticipated. Jake watched with satisfaction as the massive station's lights flickered and went dark. Its weapons systems shut down, and its communication arrays stopped transmitting. But the real surprise came when Jake activated the second phase of his attack. Hidden in his ship's cargo bay were dozens of small autonomous drones programmed with artificial intelligence routines that incorporated human tactical thinking. The drones swarmed the disabled alien station like angry insects, each one finding different ways to cause maximum damage and disruption. Some drones burrowed into the station's hull and began destroying critical systems from the inside. Others attached themselves to communication equipment and began broadcasting false signals that would confuse alien coordination efforts. A few specialized units targeted the station's power systems, creating feedback loops that would take hours or days to repair. The aliens had never encountered anything like coordinated drone swarms using adaptive artificial intelligence. Their defensive protocols assumed that human attacks would follow conventional patterns with predictable objectives and methods. They had no procedures for dealing with dozens of small autonomous units that were programmed to improvise their own tactics based on local conditions. Jake watched the chaos spreading throughout the alien station and felt a surge of satisfaction that was immediately replaced by concern. For the other Defense Corps teams, his attack had been successful, but the real test would be whether the coordinated offensive could disrupt alien operations, enough to prevent their planned invasion of Earth. The answer came within hours as reports began, arriving from the other strike teams. Commander Lopez had successfully destroyed 3 alien supply depots in the asteroid belt, cutting off the invasion force from essential resources and spare parts. Dr. Chen had infiltrated an alien command center and planted computer viruses that were spreading through their communication networks, creating confusion and false orders throughout their fleet. Most dramatically, a team led by veteran operative Captain Sarah, Wong had managed to capture an alien command ship by using boarding tactics that were so aggressive and unconventional that the alien crew had been completely overwhelmed before they could mount effective resistance. Wong was now broadcasting false orders to alien units throughout the solar system, directing them to move away from Earth and investigate non-existent human threats in distant locations. But the greatest success came from an unexpected source. The alien forces had been monitoring Earth's communications for months, studying human behavior, and preparing countermeasures for expected resistance patterns. What they had not anticipated was that the Defense Corps would deliberately exploit this surveillance by feeding them false information designed to support human tactical objectives. Every message the aliens had intercepted, every communication they had decoded, and every piece of intelligence they had gathered about human capabilities had been carefully crafted to create specific misconceptions about Defense Corps strength and intentions. When the actual attack began, the aliens found themselves responding to threats that did not exist while ignoring the real dangers that were systematically destroying their infrastructure. Jake received a priority communication from Harris as he completed his mission and began the return journey to Earth. The operation has exceeded all expectations, Harris reported. We have disrupted alien coordination so severely that their invasion force is in complete disarray. Multiple alien commanders are requesting reinforcements and new orders, but their communication systems are too damaged to provide effective coordination. But the real victory was not tactical, it was psychological. The aliens had been supremely confident in their ability to quickly defeat human resistance, using overwhelming force and superior technology. Instead, they had encountered something they had never faced before. An enemy that refused to fight according to established rules and kept changing tactics faster than defensive measures could be implemented. The alien leadership was discovering that humans were far more dangerous than their intelligence reports had suggested. Every attempt to counter human tactics resulted in new problems that required different solutions, and each solution created additional vulnerabilities that human forces immediately exploited. It was like fighting an enemy that could adapt and evolve faster than any military doctrine could account for. Jake monitored alien communications during his return flight and was amazed by the level of confusion and concern he was hearing. Alien commanders were reporting that human forces were using impossible tactics, employing technology that should not exist, and achieving objectives that violated their understanding of military science. Some alien units were requesting permission to withdraw from the solar system rather than continue operations against such an unpredictable enemy. But the most satisfying communication Jake intercepted was a message from the alien fleet commander to his superiors in distant star systems. The humans are not behaving as predicted, the message stated. They refuse to surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. They use tactics that appear to be tactically insane but somehow prove effective, and they seem to become more dangerous when their situation becomes more desperate. Recommend postponing invasion pending further analysis of human capabilities. Jake smiled as he listened to the alien commander struggling to explain how 43 human Operatives had managed to disrupt an invasion force of 3,000 ships. The aliens were learning what humans had always known, that desperation, creativity, and refusal to accept defeat could sometimes overcome advantages that appeared insurmountable. When Jake finally reached Earth and landed at the Nevada facility, Harris was waiting with an expression of satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. They had won this battle, but both men understood that it was only the beginning of a much longer conflict. "We have bought Earth some time," Harris said as they reviewed the mission reports. "The alien invasion has been postponed, possibly for years while they try to develop new strategies for dealing with human unpredictability. But they will be back, and next time they will be better prepared for what we can do." Jake nodded, understanding the implications. The Defense Corps had revealed capabilities that could not be hidden again, and future alien operations would account for human tactical innovations. The next phase of the war would require even more creativity and adaptability than the first. But Jake was not concerned about future challenges. The mission had proven that humans could hold their own against galactic powers that had dominated space for millennia. Earth had announced to the universe that humanity was not going to quietly accept conquest or extinction, and that any species attempting to threaten human survival would pay a price higher than they expected. "What do we do now?" Jake asked. "Now we prepare for the real war," Harris replied. "The aliens know we exist. They know we are dangerous, and they know we will not surrender. From this point forward, humanity's place in the galaxy will be determined by our ability to stay one step ahead of enemies who have every advantage except the willingness to think differently." Jake looked up at the stars visible through the facility's concealed observation dome and felt a sense of anticipation rather than fear.